Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with an extraordinary individual who, after 2 decades as a teacher and leader, aspires to answer the question, how can we make the educational experience happier, less stressful, and more relevant? Great question. And we're going to dig right into it today. I'm speaking with Kate Wadsworth, a coach, consultant, educator, author, and founder of What If Education. How are you today, Kate?
I'm really good, thank you. Really looking forward to this conversation today.
Me too. And we decided just before we hit record, we're going to go full disclosure. I was at a wedding yesterday, and although I do not drink, we did not get back till 1 o'clock in the morning, which was a long old 3.5 hour drive. And Kate was out being a warrior yesterday, weren't you, Kate?
Yeah, getting muddy, jumping into pools of mud and climbing over walls and all sorts of things at Total Warrior. And it was weirdly a lot of fun.
How'd you get on?
Well, pretty good. We came 17th in our age category, so we were very happy with that. We were expecting a lot less.
So I think we can start a couple of minutes in. Don't mess with Kate.
Yeah, it was really good fun. But yeah, I think I might be worried out anyway.
Yeah. So we're going to have a very chilled conversation today, albeit slightly passionate at times. I always start with the same question for different people. I've never had a similar answer. You can go anywhere with it. And it's, how did you become Kate Wadsworth?
I kept the answer to this very relevant to the topic that we're going to talk about today, because it could have gone in lots of directions. But I started thinking about this in terms of my education journey, because really that is how I've become who I am today. And I think it's partly because I'm so passionate about education, that it's a career, but it's also my life. I've made it my life. So that journey of becoming Kate Wadsworth began when I was about 4 years old. That's when I started my teacher training with my teddies and my sisters, poor things. And I think I just had it in my blood. I was always going to be a teacher. I never wanted to be anything else. I never considered any other vocation. And every step along the journey has always been about how can I be the best educator or the best teacher that I can be. So it started at 4, and then ever since then, it has been about a journey to all the different ways that I can make education happier, less stressful and more relevant. But it's only in the last few years that I've been able to sort of articulate that mission and drive.
Wow. I'd love to meet those teddies and see what they think.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the feedback would be, so...
One of the reasons that we connected is around the whole idea of what if education. I've shared a few times on the podcast about how difficult I've found it to observe my children going through the education system. And I'm not speaking ill of anyone or saying anyone's done anything wrong or anything like that. I'm just pointing out what I'm seeing. And I find that in a day with mobile phones, social media, and all of these differences that are in the world, you told me once, I can't remember the date you told me, when the educational system was created.
Yeah, something like 1874, maybe I'm slightly off there, but it's certainly around about that time.
Very long time.
Yes, a very long time.
Yeah, and a lot has changed since then. And in many ways, the education system has changed. And when I say that, I'm probably talking more buildings, technology, things like that. But the actual curriculum and what's being taught and what's expected hasn't changed a lot. And the approaches in some cases, we've learned so much really in recent times around mental health, around psychology, around just understanding human beings, and also remembering that children are also human beings. They're not a completely different species. They have emotions and all of those things. So when I saw your page and heard about your work, I adore it, because it's saying what I think a lot of people are trying to say. No one wants to be unkind. There's nothing in blaming or accusing or anything like that. It's just about, and it feels like a lost skill these days, being able to have a sensible debate to come to a conclusion that's helpful. And I feel like that encapsulates your brand. Perhaps I'm wrong. I don't know. You agree or disagree, but I think that encapsulates your brand. You're somebody who's asking the right questions. And I just love the fact that your business starts with what if.
I know. I think I love that too. And when I first called it what I called it, oh, you're spot on, by the way. Thank you. That's a lovely way to describe it. And that's how it's intended. It is provocative at times, but it's also mindful of the fact that we all want the same thing, and that we're all pushing in the same direction. And at the end of the day, the education space, it should be happy. It shouldn't be full of stress. And what we're doing should feel relevant for children and educators. So yes, it's provocative at times, and it does aim to shine a light on perhaps the challenges that we face. But I hope to balance it out also with my huge deep regard for everybody who works in the space, and it continues to work really hard to meet the challenges that just seem to get bigger and bigger.
I think it's really easy with all of the passion and the longingness to be helpful for anybody involved in the education business. Because I think what you spoke to earlier was it takes a certain type of person to become a teacher, because it's not an easy job. It's a very challenging job, and there are lots of different challenges, human beings, hierarchy of schools and bureaucracy that's in every type of organization. And it takes a certain type of person to be able to do that, much like being a nurse or a doctor or being in the armed forces or the police service or anything like that. And I had the pleasure of being at a conference a little while ago, and I had always seen it from my kids' perspective as kids going to school, my own experience of going to school. But when I got the privilege of speaking with teachers, I really began to understand the challenges that everyone's in on every level. And what I like about you is that, and what you're trying to do is, yes, you're pointing out some of the things that could be done better, but you're also providing solutions. And I think that's the important part there. It's not just about accusing, blaming, or anything. Not that you're doing that. You're pointing out observations you've seen and making suggestions. And I really admire that.
Yeah, thank you. And I like to think that change is possible. I'm not saying it's not hard, but I do like to believe that it's possible and that there is hope for the space. And I also know, not even just believe, but know that there's lots of great examples of people and schools and school leaders, educators everywhere who are proving that it can be done differently in a way that serves the children and educators better. And that's really a great picture. And I'm trying to sort of focus on that as much as I can, as well as point out where change does need to happen.
Where in your experiences as a teacher and your experiences with your bears and your sisters and stuff like that as a child, and now, what is it that drives you to answer that question, what if?
What drives me is that I think curiosity is the beginning of finding the answers. And I think that if I advocate for curiosity as a way of learning for the children, for the students, for the pupils. And I think we found ourselves in a space that is very old-fashioned, this direct instruction, knowledge-rich curriculum that doesn't actually serve the future that the children are going into or the young people that are going into. And so curiosity is such an important thing for me. And I just love that kind of, well, what if though? What if we could try it like this? What could happen then? And I think it just creates really rich conversations and it opens up possibilities. And I love the idea of opening up possibilities for positive change.
I think you're right. That curiosity is the furthest it can be away from, I know what's best for you, which I honestly don't know if I know anybody that likes that approach. We have to have some authority and some structure and some frameworks, obviously. But what you're acknowledging is that not only do people learn differently anyway, in this day and age, there are so many options, so many possibilities, and you're curious about that.
Absolutely. And we're in a very, very different world than the world we were in when, like you mentioned before, this style of education and this type of education was introduced, which was absolutely serving the population and society at the time. The world has completely changed, but the education system that educates the people in that world hasn't. And that's what has to change.
Totally agree. And that brings me on to my next question. Like, what do you feel is the most impactful thing that you've learned in the education space? What's the crux of it? What's the realization, the moment where you're like, things have to change?
Yeah, so can I give two here?
Okay. Totally, go for it.
I couldn't pick. So number one is that I had a realization that we cannot wait for systemic change, for things to happen. We can't wait for the system to change, to see change on the ground. And the reason for that is it's too politically driven to be able to meet the needs of the young people that are in front of us. And we can't avoid that. So the way that policy is written and the wider picture that the government have to look at when it comes towards education means that we don't see what we need to see in our classrooms and schools. And the outcome of that is what we're seeing, which is a lot of reports of stress, a lot of lots of absence, lots of behaviour issues, lots of retention and recruitment issues. So all of those things that come from this dissonance between knowing what we need to see and what's actually happening at a systemic level. So I think we have to look at ways we can make change happen for ourselves despite the system, not because of the system. And that was a big realisation for me and one of the reasons why I decided to take the leap to look at, right, okay, so what is in our control then? What can we do? Where can we make the change that we want to see? So that's the first one. And then the second one is that a child-centered school can only exist when the good health, and that's emotional and physical, of the workforce is valued. And there's a misconception that's very costly for schools, and that it's only the well-being of the children that matters. And if you've got the well-being of the children spot on and right, then you're going to have a thriving child-centered school, and it doesn't matter about how the educators are feeling. And they might pay lip service to, we care about well-being, but the actions speak louder than the words. And there may be some thought and attention gone to well-being, but are those strategies working, and have we got a happy, healthy workforce? And if the answer to that question is no, and I have to say that question often isn't either asked or answered truthfully, but until we have a happy, thriving, healthy workforce, we cannot say we have a child-centered school.
What I picked up on there was, first of all, I love the sort of almost like doctor's approach of looking for the symptoms of what might be wrong, like you're saying, like school refusal, or at the very least attendance being dropping. Because that means something, right?
Yeah.
That means something. I don't know what it means, but it means something,
It means that we are not managing yet to make schools a place where the majority of educators and pupils want to be.
Mm.
And the way that we deal with that at the moment is we issue fines and threatening letters. What I would love to see is that we flip that round and we go, we're struggling to retain our teachers. We're struggling to get a quarter of our children into schools. So there's a quarter now of persistently absent children. What can we do? What can we change to make those people want to be in our schools?
Such a beautiful question. And it's the idea of when somebody doesn't conform to the rules, let's say, that it's immediately seen as a mistake. That person potentially is ultimately labelled as troublesome. They're flagged, which means that in a sense they don't really stand a chance of being anything else because they're already determined as a problem. And this is me saying this, not Kate.
No, I honestly, I really hate the term school refuser, because I feel like that puts the blame onto the young person. And we have to go, hang on a minute. How are we putting this language in place that makes this person who is unable to attend school for whatever reason, we are calling them a school refuser? Doesn't sit well with me at all.
Never actually heard it said that way. That's how it feels. Because I've had that with my children. It's been difficult. And I've spoken at times about one of my son's journey with autism and how we've discovered that. And I'm always trying to be as open-minded and as fair as possible. It is something that's fairly new, like the neurodiversity within schools. And it is going to take a little while. Whenever I work with people one-to-one or even groups, when it comes down to a change of behavior, the person who needs to change their behavior needs to have an understanding and a willingness to do so. But the people around them also have to be patient and wait for that change, because it's not going to happen immediately. But as far as I could see, neither's kind of happening. And I don't know if it's about blame. It's more about impact. It's about, okay, that's what's happening. It kind of doesn't matter whose fault it is at this stage. It's about how can we resolve it. And that's where I think you come in, and it's very important. And I love as well that you bring up the teachers' well-being as well as the students, because they're working in an ecosystem, and an ecosystem needs to have harmony in order to work. And if you go into a woodland and you cut down trees, invasive weeds grow and things go out of kilter. And it is a difficult task, but it's never going to get addressed unless people start having conversations that are a little bit messy and a little bit unthought of, and ideas come out that aren't so good, but part of it is, and all of those different things.
Absolutely. And I really do try and move away from the blame thing, because I think that's where it gets really grey and really messy, because it's not as simple as that, as to be able to say, well, this one thing is to blame. There is so many factors that have made education the tricky space that it is, that are out of the school's control.
Yeah.
And so it goes back to that thing again of going, right, well, what is within our control? What changes can we make happen? But you're absolutely right about the ecosystem. And whenever I talk about education, I feel as passionately for school leaders as I do for educators, as I do for young people, because if any of those three aren't right, neither are the other two. We have to have all three in a great place for a school to be thriving.
Yeah, that I think is probably, so far, that's the most significant statement. It has to be understood. what I saw was that teachers are human, obviously, and they're having their struggles. And ultimately, I cannot get behind the idea that someone wants to become a teacher to screw kids up. I don't see that working.
I'm so glad you've said that, because I think, having been on the other side of it, sometimes it can feel like that's what people think. You know, that why would
I
we
don't mean
make
to
that
laugh.
choice?
It's so ridiculous. But it does feel like sometimes that's what people are saying without saying it. It's like, can you hear that? So if they're going into it to help children, then that's good, right? The kids need to be going to school. And look, kids are kids, right? They're not always going to enjoy every element of school. But my son, for example, my youngest, he gets up differently when there's sport. If he's got lots of sport on that day, he skips into school. If he's got a day where he knows he's predominantly in the classroom, and he'll probably kill me for saying this, he's got music. He doesn't particularly like that. So it's a hard day for him, but he gets on with it, because by and by throughout the week, there are pockets where he can have a good time. And frankly, that's life, right? We don't always enjoy our job. We don't always enjoy every day. It's not the way it is. So you're taking that diagnosis, you're looking at some of the symptoms that require us to take action. So if you were a doctor, you would ask what the symptoms are, and you would go, okay, well, if these are the symptoms, here are possibly some of the things it could be. These are the solutions, and you're starting that debate. Problem is, it feels like you're doing it on your own a little bit. I don't know if that's true, but it does feel like you're one of the only voices out there that are asking these questions. You're also talking about the teacher well-being. Where have you got to with this?
So I think something that that's a really nice thing for me to be able to say at this point is I have discovered I am absolutely not the only one asking these questions, which makes me just sing to be inside to be able to give that message, because it felt like that initially. And then I started to explore this space and started to network and meet people. And I have met so many wonderful, amazing people who are proactively making positive change happen. In all corners of the country, in fact, in all corners of the world. And that has just been the most fantastic part of this experience, that I've become part of a community of other people who are also advocating for educators and school leaders and children in this way. So that's been just brilliant. And also it's been wonderful to see so many schools who are actually doing some real out of the box thinking, what's within their control, and starting to see how the things that I'd hoped were possible actually are possible. So that's a really nice message to be able to give you. If you haven't come across these people, they are there. And it's
lovely,
getting louder and louder as well. That's important to say.
It might be putting you on the spot, but what are some of the examples that you've seen of people doing things differently?
So there's just a gorgeous little school up in the Lake District called Greyrig Primary. Every single time I look at their Instagram posts, that's it. That's exactly it. Spot on. Perfect. They've got just the right balance of everything. And the children are thriving. The educators are thriving. They love school. And you can feel that even just from, I now know a bit more about the school, but I could tell that from their Instagram. There's a lady who has an Instagram page called My Mummy Teacher. She and I, basically our thoughts, I feel like we may just have the same brain, because I might be about to post something and I'll go on, and it's uncanny how much she's already posted it. And we just think along the same lines, and that's really reassuring for me. There's Jen Foster, who does the Good Morning Club. She's making a huge difference in the education space in terms of mental wellbeing in class for educators and pupils. ICT Mr. P, if anyone's heard of him. If you haven't, follow him. He's hilariously funny. He's still a teacher, but he advocates for massive change in the education system. And I think he's just got an MBE in this round. And that's just off the top of my head, but I could keep going. But there's just so many people out there really working hard to push for change. And then there are other people who I'm working alongside with. There's a lady who's developing a curriculum called the Cool Curriculum, which is bringing in provision beyond early years. Such a clever concept. And I'm on the advisory panel for that. And that has just been a joy. So there's actually real action happening as well.
As you say that, I've met Charlie Burley.
Yeah.
Who's the teacher's health coach, and he's helping teachers, which That's I think, right. Again, is, as you point out, because there's a lot of like unhealthy behaviors that come from the stresses of being a teacher. Some of them are alcohol, marking with wines, that type of thing. And generally just managing the stresses of sometimes knowing you have to implement things that perhaps you don't necessarily agree with sometimes, which happens in every industry. You know, it's not exclusive to this, but it's very difficult and it's happening to children. And that's the difference, isn't it? I think in some sense is that you go and join a company and there are rules that are a little bit thoughtless and not thought through, but it's adult to adult and perhaps there's some room for debate. But children don't have that emotional maturity to have those debates at all times. I mean, my son did it the other day. It made me laugh. He said, I had a debate with a teacher and my wife and I held each other's hands like, oh, where's this going? And he did well. He was respectful and I was proud of him. And he managed to dodge a detention, I think, which was good. Because what that means to me is that putting aside him being my son, the pupil and the teacher are working together, which I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've met Charlie myself, and he's fabulous at what he does. And I love his vulnerability and the way he talks about his own experiences and how it's led to what he does now, because it's so representative of how many educators are feeling how he was feeling. And what I like about his work is that he understands that there are a lot of educators out there that are working outside of their values. They might not realize that's what they're doing. I was certainly in that space. I now know that I was working outside of my values, but at the time I just felt ill. I just felt unwell. I knew I was asking children to do things that didn't sit right with me. I was in year 6 at that time and putting children through SATS assessments, and I could see the anxiety that was bringing and the emotional turmoil for lots of those children. And I hated it, and it went against every fibre of what I felt a great education looked like. And so that showed up in not feeling well a lot of the time. And I think Charlie's doing brilliant work at helping educators to see where this underlying ill health is coming from and however that manifests, and then how to overcome that. So yeah, he's another great one.
That's significant as well. Helping teachers realize that that's why they feel the way they do. That there's something disjointed going on within their values and belief systems that are being played out, and how they feel and what they have to do and all those different things. Now, I'm not trying to say anyone's a tyrant or anything like that.
Of course not.
But it's just understanding that even when you tell, I don't know, a half truth or whatever, there's a little feeling that comes with that. So imagine having to do something that you don't necessarily agree with or think is right, because that's the rules, you know. And you can see that kid's having external struggles. I know myself, it was a teacher for me at school that helped with the domestic violence going on at home. For me, it was one day I was in a particularly bad way and the teacher pulled me aside after class, caught me at the right time, asked me the right question, and I just broke down. And what was so hilarious is that I hated that teacher until then. I thought he was horrible. I thought he was a really horrible, mean teacher, but actually he wasn't at all. Afterwards, he could see something was wrong and he pulled me aside and I just started crying, and he was really, really lovely, and he got other people involved and he was helpful. So I've always had that soft spot. And I think that was probably my first realization that not everything is the way it seems, you know. So they're very important people, teachers, very important people. And when you think about it, they are teachers. They're there to teach us a lot more than just the curriculum. So they can become role models in some cases.
Yeah, exactly.
So can you explain what you mean when you talk about children experiencing awe in every day as a part of the educational experience?
Yeah, we had a lovely conversation about this, didn't we? Just the other week, where I blabbed on about my passion for awe and wonder in
no blabbing, it was brilliant.
Solving some of the challenges that we're facing. And really it started out as a bit of a hobby, as part of the what if, you know, getting curious about what if we could find solutions to make this space happier, less stressful, more relevant, and how can we do it? And I, over time, had started to realise that a personal quirk, if you like, a personal interest in mine in sort of finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, translated really, really well to that question. And the more I dug, the more I realised that schools are the perfect environment to take advantage of a solution that's actually really underutilised. And as I started to look into awe and wonder and all of those things that come alongside it, I realised that it's free, which is, you know, a problem that we struggle with, trying to find solutions that end up costing money. It's a prevention rather than a cure, which I'm all for always, because it's something that prevents, it can prevent things. That it's universally accessible, which is something we're always looking for. It's completely inclusive for everybody in that room, in that school. It's scientifically proven to benefit mental and physical health. It's fun. It's age appropriate because it fits to any age. Curiosity inspiring. It doesn't need to be launched as a change initiative. It reduces workload rather than adds to it. It leans into using technology purposefully. Just kept going and going with this. This is actually a catch-all, unbelievable solution for lots of things if we can get it right. It also, when you experience or as a shared group, as a through shared discovery or shared discussion, you get something called collective effervescence, which is this bonding emotion, this bonding feeling that binds you together. The best way probably to think about that is if you sing in a large group and you get goosebumps or you get a rush of emotion, that's collective effervescence happening, and it only comes because it's being part of something special that you're collectively all working towards, and that's an awe experience. And so it's great also for relationships and connection. So I advocate for trying to make space in classrooms to have awe-inspiring conversations or awe-inspiring moments. And the best way to do that is to just notice what is unbelievably extraordinary about the ordinary world around you. And that's why it's inclusive and accessible, because we all have that, in that group, we all have that same world around us. And we can all choose to look at it through a different lens together. So I've explored and loved learning about all of this stuff. And it's not let me down on the journey. It's just got better and better. And I ended up, as you know, writing a book about this called Awe Every Day. And the first question in the book is a simple question, but it's the one that I've explored a lot with a lot of different groups of children and a lot of different educators. And it's called the question is, what is weird about water? And that's all it is. And what has come out of that is just unbelievable and it always, I should probably point out that always it's about shared discovery. So it's not about educators needing subject knowledge before you begin. In fact, if anything, that's detrimental to the process, because it's something that you learn and you explore and you ask questions about together and you learn together. It's a bit of a leveler. That helps with the bonding and the relationship building. So we've gone from dinosaurs could have washed in the water that we're drinking to...
Loved that.
Yeah, that this water...
That blew my mind.
I know. And that when I told you about that first time and you had that wow moment, I was like, there it is right there. It's that wow moment. So so the water in our glass is about 4.5 billion years old. Then we get to talk about, well, what does that look like? What does that mean? And then you can get to really mathematical and scientific discussion as they get older, to questions about why water doesn't just fall out of the bottom of the earth. And then you start talking about gravity and space and tides and moon, but it just goes in that direction. The children just start to get really buzzy about it. But what if, and how does that? And you don't always have to have the answers. That's part of the experience, is just more curiosity. And then sometimes it's philosophical. So I've had one kid say to me about how water can never get wet because it is the wetness. I was like, oh, I'm going to have to think about that a little bit. I can't get my head around that.
Wow.
To another, I think, 7-year-old saying, but how can water travel through electricity? But water and electricity can't mix. I was like, okay, let's find out. Let's discover that. What other questions do you have? And this rich discussion starts happening. To a scientific anomaly where we discovered that water can boil and freeze at exactly the same time. Google it, it's true. And also with younger age children, you're like, what's the biggest bubble we can make? And it's the open-endedness and the freedom to just explore this thing that we just take for granted and take a glass of water and have a drink. Have you drunk your water today? How we can take that and turn it into this unbelievable education experience that can go in any direction is just magic. So I'm a bit passionate about that one.
No, I love it. I absolutely love it. And just interestingly enough, making the biggest bubble is not exclusive to children. I spent some time at a wedding yesterday and there was a little girl blowing bubbles and I was trying to get this biggest bubble safe. I potentially became more competitive than I needed to. It's okay. So
it can bring that out in the best of us.
Well, it's that childlike, and I think that's potentially what you're saying. It's like children are curious, and there are moments sometimes in the educational system where that curiosity is not encouraged.
We have got used to not making space for it, thinking that it's chaotic or that it's subordinate to academic learning. But actually, since doing this and having these discussions and testing this out and trying these ideas out, I've had more academic discussions that have led to more discovery that meets the curriculum than I ever had in teaching a scheme of work. And not only has it led that way, but the children have been so much more invested in it because it started with them and their questions. So I didn't expect it to go in that way. I thought this would be more of an add-on, like, can you add a little bit on, like a soft start in the morning, or a calm down after lunch, or a behaviour regulator or something like that. And it's grown into something that actually this has got potential to be whatever you want it to be as an educator. You can use it however little or however much you like. The outcome will always be the same. You'll get excited learners and an educator that feels part of something special.
Do you know what it makes me think of? I know it sounds like a weird thing to say, but like Indiana Jones, because it's got that like exploratory feel. So like if you're an explorer, you're going to places where you've never been before and you don't know anything about it. So you're going in there completely blind, but you're going in together in a classroom and you're exploring a topic, and exploration demands curiosity. It demands a little bit of caution, excitement, fear, all of these things that come in because you're about to discover and learn and experience and all of those different things. So it's like that whole idea of awe. You're like this educational explorer and you're out exploring water and it's crazy. Like, why do we not think about it all the time? And actually, one of the things you said there was about not always having to have the answer. And I think sometimes that is the point of awe. It's like, I get it when I go to the mountains and I stand in the mountains and I just think, how?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The enjoyment is in that feeling of how, and it doesn't need to go any further than that. And this is another thing, another aspect that's been a lovely welcome addition. And that is that I've always felt very strongly that the environment about the education and the education about the environment, we're not doing that well for children. We're scaremongering them about things that are outside of their control. I would love to see environmental education become much more about innovation and about what we have and our resources and these young people and their brilliant minds. How do we innovate to solve some of the problems rather than, and I don't want to say this flippantly, but showing children videos of polar bears starving in the Arctic and then that being the lesson, and then they come home and that's been the lesson on the environment. That's a real concern for me, because that is about despair, and I want it to be about hope and possibility. Let's make it about hope and possibility. And one thing that can happen about noticing the extraordinary in our ordinary world is we feel all of a sudden very connected to it. And when you're talking about being up in those mountains and having those feelings of awe, you are personally rooted and connected to your environment around you and the wonderful world that we live in. I want that for our children, because it's those feelings that are going to inspire them to innovate, look after the planet, to be part of something rather than feel disconnected from it. So that was a little welcome addition too.
It connects you with humanity. Not only am I having that awe feeling, I'm having this feeling of respect. And I stopped short of saying spirituality, but it did feel like that a little bit. When I'm up in the mountains, there's this feeling of life testing you, like, are you cold? Are you in pain? Tough. Kind of move through it, or don't.
Yeah, and we're taught, there's been so much in the news recently, I don't know if you've seen it, about children needing more grit and more resilience, and I think absolutely grit and resilience are super important, but in the way that you've just described, where it's challenging and you test yourself to do things, but it's not done in grit, and resilience isn't found from somebody telling you to do something repeatedly that you hate doing and you just suck it up. That's not grit or resilience to me.
That's
but what you've described as grit and resilience, and that's what we need to be giving them experiences of as best we can.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I do it. I do it because I move through this path of being in self-development, and I educate people on certain things. And every now and again, I don't want to sit or allow myself to be put on a pedestal. I want to go up in the mountains and see whether I'm talking trash or not. Like, how tough are you? Like, how resilient are you? And when I climbed Killy, I couldn't get to the top, and that was humbling, but it was necessary, and it's okay. It's fine. And I learned a very important lesson on that day about failure, and I needed to learn that. I had to be. And ironically, what I came to learn was that failure isn't failure. Failure is learning, and it's necessary. And it actually inspired me to do something that I haven't done in a long time, and I took up jiu-jitsu. And I know it's totally off topic, but jiu-jitsu in principle is about failing many times towards success. So you go in there knowing you're not going to win. Yeah. You are at the bottom of the totem pole here, and you're not going to win. And I love that. I absolutely love that because
And
that's part of life, isn't it?
I'd argue that you do win because you win to get you to the next level. You win something, and that is the what it takes to get you to the next bit and the next bit and the next bit. And it's those small successes. Someone once said to me, it's a well-known quote, but it really stuck with me, that success in anything is not one big event in the future. It's small incremental failures that happen today. And I thought, yeah, that is absolutely true. And we do demonize failure in schools. And we pretend we don't, but educators are so unkind to themselves about failure. And we don't create safe enough spaces for people to fail safely, educators and children. That's
Yeah,
another
because
thing.
somebody tried to take that away from me. They said, "Oh, Johnny, no, you didn't fail." And I said, "No, I did fail. I went to Kilimanjaro to climb to the top and I didn't." Yeah, but no, yeah, but let me have my failure so I can analyze it
Yeah.
and I can see where I can learn and where I can grow.
Mm.
And I think people are afraid of that. I was afraid of that. I'm not going to sit there and say I wasn't. I felt really deeply shameful about failing, but actually it's funny because I'm kind of saying it was a failure, but it helped me learn. So anyway, I've totally hijacked this. So I'm
No,
sorry.
it's all so linked. Actually, it's
Yeah.
really, really linked. Is
Well,
relationship with failure and the language of failure, and how we're so conditioned to find failure so confronting. But what you've described there is that actually failure is a gift if you choose to see it that way and you choose to use it in a way that helps you to progress. And it might not be what you were expecting, but you go in a different direction. Jiu-jitsu for you, you're going to learn a new skill. How is that a failure?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
And that's
but
it.
it's not that but then when I say how is that a failure, it's almost as if failure is bad. Yeah, it's a failure, but it's the word failure that we need to stop seeing as a bad word or a bad thing.
That's it in a nutshell. There needs to be another way of describing that, perhaps, because I'm not sure that you can be curious without risking failure. So if you're not going to risk failure, then you don't have that opportunity. So I talk a lot about being afraid and fear as a necessary component for being brave, which is the only way you're ever going to step out of your comfort zone. Like if you think that you know everything about maths, then you're not open to learning anymore because you wander through thinking you know it all. And then one day you come unstuck and it's a massive failure, but it's because you didn't have the smaller failure earlier on. And as we learn in life, if you don't let something in, it just escalates until you learn it.
Yeah, you learn a lot more from your failures than you do your successes, in my experience, anyway.
You do. And I heard you mention earlier, you said about relationships and connection. And I'm curious about how important are meaningful relationships and connections to young people in education?
Yeah, they're absolutely foundational to a great education experience. You know, it's no secret to anybody that you don't learn well if you don't feel safe, because you've got other things you've got to think about than that learning that are more important at that point, which is self-preservation. And so whether that safety is or that unsafety is perceived or not, the reaction is the same. So I think the best thing that we can do for our educators and our children is create environments where relationships and connections come first for everybody. And then if we've got that foundation in place, that's when great learning happens. And that's when you can accept that we're going to make brave choices and fail safely. But you've got to have that foundation in place. And I think that's often what's a bit wobbly, in that there's no time for those things. They get pushed aside because there's content to cover and tests to pass. And before we realise what's happened, we're working on wobbly foundations. And, you know, I think we teach and learn best when we feel recognised, when we feel well valued, and when we feel part of something special. And that can only come from great relationships and safe connections.
It's like when you see children trying to learn with a wasp in the room. You know, when a wasp gets into the classroom
Love
and
that.
everybody stops listening
Yeah.
because they're terrified this wasp's going to sting them, you know? It's that safety, isn't it?
Yeah, I've never thought about it like that, but that's absolutely true. And for some children, that wasp is in the room.
Yeah, exactly that. And it's that I don't feel safe and I can't concentrate on what you're saying because there's this thing going on, whatever it is, you know, wasp in the room or something else. You know, maybe the teacher's in a bad mood. I don't know what's going on, which is a very human thing. But it's all of this relationships and connection. And again, it's about, instead of it being the student against the teacher or the teacher against the student, it's the student and the teacher working together towards a common goal.
Yeah, we all want the same thing essentially at the end. Everybody in education wants the same thing. And that is for those children to thrive in school and the educators to thrive in school, and for our young people to be set up for life by an educational experience that they've enjoyed.
I spoke to my father-in-law the other day and I was talking about how I was looking forward to our conversation. And he just looked at me and he's a fairly successful guy in life. And he turned around to me and he said, and I could see in his eyes, I mean, this guy's in his 70s, and he says, I hated school. And I was just like, wow, you still remember all, like you could see the feelings and the emotions in his face. And it's like, it is that important. It's foundational to who we become. It's absolutely pivotal. Those experiences you have at school make or break most people, I would say.
Yeah. And they have lifelong consequences, good and bad. And sometimes people use a bad experience to propel forward and to make changes or progress despite it. But I would love it to be that it was less that and much more that it was because of it, because of a great education experience that I am where I am. But I don't know whether you find this, the narrative is often, I'm where I am despite my education, not because of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm dyslexic and I managed to turn that into a degree mainly because I embraced the fact that I was dyslexic and realized that it wasn't that there was something wrong with me. It was just I learned a little bit different. So my next question was, well, how do I learn? And they said, like this. And I said, awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
You know, and now I go off and listen to books and I can't get enough of it. It's amazing. But I want to share this experience. I was talking to a young lad the other day. He's doing his DOV and he said to me, Gray, the weather forecast is this. We're going to be walking and all day on Dartmoor and we've got to pack our tents up in the rain. And I looked at him and I think, yeah, but think about how you're going to feel when you've done all that. And he said, I don't think of it like that. And it's that resilience, isn't it? It's that things not being linear and brilliant and there being that challenge and that fear of that challenge and then realizing you overcome it. That is resilience. You don't really get it without that little bit of discomfort, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you like to see change in the educational experience and how would you implement it?
I'd like to see much more value placed on how the educational experience feels at the time and much less value placed on scores and testing. So, because really it's very outcomes based at the moment. Everything that we're putting in, or that the way that the education system is designed at the minute, is it's to fill children with knowledge that then they can recall later to get a score that can then be used as data. And that's what drives why things are like they are. And I think there's very little regard when it's like that. And when you think about it like that, there's little regard for how that experience is feeling for everybody who's part of it. So I would love to see much, much less focus on misleading, because they are grades and scores, because it's a high stakes one-shot test with a whole host of factors that could mean that it doesn't give a true representation of that child's ability, progress, all of those things. And yet it's used as if it does do those things. So I would love to see that we could focus more on the educational experience, make it age appropriate and more fun for everybody, and less focus on what the scores are like at the end. And that we measure outcomes differently. We have a different measure of outcomes. And the way that I would want to see that implemented, because I know people go, but that's impossible because we are in the system that requires those scores and that we don't have a choice. And to some degree we don't. But what I have seen and what I do see now is that it is possible to do things differently despite that. And so for me, it all comes from creating cultures of trust in our school. And that means that we have these things, we have these external pressures and these hoops we have to jump through. But if we have a school that is built in a culture of trust, we can minimize the impact of those things because we can safely fail. We can make decisions that serve our children and our community better. And also it's about, for me, a culture of trust comes from schools investing time and energy in really knowing their North Star. So really understanding what are our shared values as a whole community involved, not just what a leadership team or a wellbeing team have told us that our values are, but what are our values and how do we know and how are we going to live by those? And how does everyone in our team, our community do that? And then also that leads on to then, what is our purpose and our mission? And having all of those foundational, then you can start to make choices and decisions that minimize the impact of the external pressures. But in a lot of schools, there isn't time for that work. And I think it's if we make time for that work, we can start to move away from some of the anxiety and the stress and the pressure that we're feeling.
So on a very basic level, the teachers being allowed to model the values that they expect from the students.
And I think being able to say what's important to us, what does our community need? What's our demographic of children like? What's our demographic of parents like? What are we like as a group? And how do we work well together? How do we communicate well? What's our common language? What do we need to have to make our ecosystem work really well for us? Because we're not carbon copies, even though we are put into league tables as if we are carbon copies. We know we're not. So how do we create an environment that serves us as best it can and helps us to come to work feeling happy and healthy, helps the children work in a happy and healthy way as best we can, because we've done the work to know what that is for us.
Do you know what that sounds like to me? That's beautiful, because it sounds like what you're saying is, in some way, effort needs to be rewarded, because sometimes a kid will put in the most incredible amount of effort to pass a test and then they fail. And what do they learn? Effort equals failure. That's not a great lesson to learn, is it? Because it's also not true. On this occasion, maybe the effort you put in didn't get you where you wanted to go. That doesn't mean that's the end. That could be the beginning, the middle, that could be anything. But is there a way of measuring effort in education at the moment?
I'd have to be careful in how I answered this, because I'm sure there are lots of schools who do this well and do recognise effort and recognise that success looks different for different children. But if we are going to look at what education looks like as a whole and what the expectation is at the end of key stages, the short answer is no. Because at the end of the day, you've got to hit that arbitrary measurement, whatever that is. And of course, when we look at things like standardized testing, the way that those tests work, a proportion of children are deemed to fail. Otherwise, the scoring system doesn't work. So we're setting children up to fail by even having those systems in place. Now, this again is how do we change the language of failure then? If we're going to do it like that, how do we make failure not be about failure, it be about a different path or a different learning experience? But I can't get my head around how we think that standardized testing is a good way to go about measuring how effective education is. It blows my mind as to that's how we still do it. How many times in my career I have taught a child who believes that only the academically capable are the successful ones, and I've had to speak to that child or find a way to say the grit, the determination, the resilience that you show to come in to school and redo these things and try and fit in this little box.
Absolutely.
You are successful, and that is going to serve you so well in your life. You might not be seeing it now. All of these things are going to be part of whatever you want to do. You are practicing skills now that are going to help you to do that, regardless of what the system is teaching you or telling you. So that's, I think, the only way that we can do it as it is now. But that's sort of very broadly answered.
You're an absolute gift, you are. I'm just full body goosebumps, and that's just exactly right. I mean, so far what I've taken from this is an ability to reward effort, like a formal way to reward effort, changing the language of failure, the importance of curiosity, exploration and awe. All of these things are, at the very least, should be being debated. And I really hope that you keep pushing it forward to get to that point. And it sounds like you are, frankly.
Yeah.
And the book is, and the people that you've surrounded yourself with. I'm excited. I just only wish it had happened before my kids went to school, but there you go.
And mine too. But, that just only pushes me harder, to do it. And there's a lady called Kate Wadsworth. She started a movement called Game Changers in Education, the Game Changers Collective. And we meet in London, and we come from all different parts of education, and we get our heads together and we talk about how do we strive for better for educators and children, and all the different ways we can do it. And she's just a force to be reckoned with, and I'm very happy to be able to be part of her work and what she does. And we are sort of all getting together to debate these things and look at ways in which we can make this change possible as best we can.
Oh, absolutely love that that's happening, and I love that you're involved in that.
It brings me a lot of
that's hope. For me, at least, that's hope. So I love that. But thank you so much for all of this today. And I just quickly learn a little bit more about you. And I want to start by asking, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received and why?
Can I choose something that I've read in a book that has stuck with me? So it wasn't given to me as a piece of advice by somebody, although I have been given a lot of really lovely advice and great advice in my life. But there's one thing that actually has manifested itself into how I live my life. And it's been amazing for my mental health. And it's Mo Gaudat, and he wrote the book Solve for Happy. And he, in that book, talks about a 3-step model. It's so simple. Simplicity is one of my values. And it starts with number 1. And if you are faced with any challenge in life, this is the best piece of advice. The first question you ask yourself is it true? And I wouldn't care to say how many times I've actually gone, okay, no, it's not. So, is it true? And if it's not, we stop there. If it is true, the second question we ask ourselves is, can I do anything about it? Genuinely, can I? And if I can, how am I going to go about that? What action am I going to take? If there's nothing I can do about it, genuinely nothing, there's the third and final question. How do I accept it and move forward despite it? And since I've had that advice, there has been so many things that I would have felt overwhelmed by, or so many things that I would have gone about differently. I would have either had a hot-headed response but with this, it just grounds me every time. And it gives me a feeling of things are within my control. Whether it is or not, I can always find something that I can work with in that. So, Mo Gaudat, thank you very much for that piece of advice that has stuck with me and I use daily.
That is absolutely amazing. That is fantastic. Is it true? Can I do anything about it? How can I accept it? That is self-development in a nutshell, frankly.
Okay.
That's
Works
what that
for
is.
me for sure.
No, it is, because I think a lot of our pain is emotionally, anyway, is experienced by thinking about things that we can't change, thinking about things that are not our fault or not anything to do with us, which is, again, going back to the polar bear starving in the Arctic. It sounds horrible, but you can't do anything about it. What can you do? Or maybe I can look after the environment a bit better, the small things that I can do. And there has to be a point where you can let go of that. Otherwise, you just carry it with you all the time amongst all of the other things that you can do something about. So
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
absolutely love that. And the last little thing I wanted to ask you, just before I let you go, because I've just honestly, thank you so much for today. I've had the best conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. I've got awe just out of this. So
Oh, thank you so much.
it's been fantastic. And the last question is the one I asked everybody. Is there anything that you would like to pass along that will help people with their self-development?
Yeah, a huge self-development shift for me was, I've talked about this quite a lot in this conversation, was being cognizant of my values and my true core values as well, which is worth saying because the ones that I thought I had, they weren't really them. They were
There's a trap.
yeah, they were my idealistic ones that I thought I wanted to have. But with the help of a brilliant coach, shout out to Sharon Lawton, who's just a superstar, with her help and also some time and thought put into it, I discovered my true core values. And since I've had those, it really has been game changing. And I think if I were to give any self-development advice, it would be it's worth putting some time and energy and effort into discovering what's working behind the scenes for you. Because once you know that, you've got an anchor there that you just didn't have before.
Got to do the software update.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be being, well, Sharon, she's an incredible person. We share that in common. She's amazing. Just out of interest, what was your top value?
So, well, I can't choose my top one, but I'm happy to share what they are. So I've got fairness, simplicity, fun. They're like my main ones, and then autonomy is very important to me. But I sort of feel like autonomy really is important to everybody. But yeah, if I've got fairness, simplicity, and fun going on, we're good.
That's amazing. Yeah. See, I love that. No, Sharon's amazing. She's very helpful at cutting through, because this is what we do sometimes, I feel, and I certainly did this. I adopted my parents' preferences as my values. And it was just like, hang on a minute. It's like, I've seen it in clients before. It's like, oh, I really value a tidy home. And then you see in the background that it's not that tidy. You're like, It's like, okay. So yeah, it's very easy to be done. And the way I see values is they're our moral compass. If you ever find yourself one of those people that are running around asking people what they think, it's because you're not clear on your values. So I absolutely agree.
And you start to discover them a bit more when you're aware of what really is important to you. And I could see that one of the reasons why teaching had become so hard for me, even though it was something I'd always wanted to do, was because the fun had gone. And then whenever I'm doing work that doesn't feel fun, I can feel the energy draining from me. And, fun is more important than a lot of other things for me when it comes to work. So I accept, okay, that, that's definitely a value for me. It has to be fun. And you could say, well, doesn't everybody want things to be fun? But there are some people who would prefer to go things about it in a more steady, methodical way. I think a good way of getting to your values is understanding if the opposite is true. And if the opposite is also true, then you're making a choice, or you're getting to a point that, no, this is more me than this. And that's not to say the other is wrong, but it's just this makes up who I am behind the scenes. And once you know that, you can make decisions more confidently, more securely about things.
That's it, isn't it? That word securely is knowing that regardless of the outcome, that you stuck to your values. And that's how I find I can sleep better. There are so many things that I have done in my life that haven't worked out, but ultimately I get to a version of what you spoke about, really, which is like, did I stick to my values? Yes, I did. Okay, then.
Yeah. And if I
that's
didn't,
what I accept.
and if I didn't, I know what I need to now do because
Yeah.
I was working outside my values, and that okay. I need to
And that
sort
is
out.
hard. That is hard. Sometimes you have to go in and let somebody down or go back on something you agree with, but it's because you've got that new information. And it's really picking yourself in that situation instead of putting yourself in a situation where you're forever going to just keep building on that resentment to the point where you perhaps do or say something you regret on all those things. So I love that. You are, like I say, an absolute gift. I've enjoyed this conversation. But just before you go, can you tell people how and where they can find you?
Yep, so you can find me on Instagram at what.if.education. I'm on LinkedIn at Kate Wadsworth, and then my website is whatifeducation.co.uk.
I'm going to put it all in the show notes, so encourage everyone to check it out and make contact with Kate, ask questions. This is so much bigger than we've been able to talk about today. And your work on your Instagram, you very often share incredible quotes that I try to reshare as well. So it's just, it's just fantastic. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me on. I've been really looking forward to this, and it's a privilege to be here talking to you like this. So thank you so much.
I'm just going to encourage people, just before we go, to live your morals, chase that ambition that you've got, and listening to conversations like this are really important. Discover what drives you and shape your environment to support the person you want to become in the future. Thank you very much for listening to the Johnny Lawrence podcast, and I will see you next week.